I'm here with Greg Jaffe from Center for Science and the Public Interest. Greg, I was wondering if you could just start off by telling us a little bit about what it is you do.
So I am the director of the biotechnology project at the Center for Science and Public Interest. CSPI is a nonprofit consumer organization located in Washington, D.C., and we deal with food and nutrition issues. And we've been in operation for 45 years now. And so I run the project on biotechnology. It's one of our advocacy projects. And it deals with all the issues around genetically engineered foods, such as genetically engineered crops and animals.
So this scientific process of genetically engineering crops or in many cases foods, is it safe?
So I'll answer the question shortly, in a short way, by saying all the current crops that are genetically engineered that are grown in the United States are safe. I think there's been significant data analysis of those crops, both by the developers of those crops as well as by independent scientists. They've been reviewed by regulatory agencies around the country, but also around the world, as well as by scientific societies like the National Academy of Sciences or the British Academy of Sciences and others, and everybody has found no food safety risk from those genetically engineered crops. And that's something that I think is not an unusual finding, because we're talking about corn. Corn has millions of has millions of pieces of DNA in it.
Right.
There are thousands and thousands of genes in it that produce lots of different proteins and molecules. In this case, we've added one new one. So the only thing we really need to check on the food safety point of view is that new gene and the product of that gene in some way harmful.
So, so I noted you said nothing currently. Is there potential that something could be created that would be harmful or dangerous and would actually make it out to the market and the consumers?
So, our view is that this is not an ultra-hazardous technology. It can be applied very, very safely, and in many instances it will be applied safely. But we could also see a food risk introduced inadvertently into our food supply if we didn't check to make sure. So, again, you have to go back to the science. What are scientists doing here? They're introducing a new gene from one species into another. So let's say that the species where they're getting that gene isn't something we've eaten before. So we're not familiar with that in our body, that protein that's now produced from that.
Yeah.
We know that some proteins are allergens. And for people who have allergies, an allergic reaction is very serious, can be life-threatening. Okay, so we know that only a very small subset of proteins that are out there, though, are allergens. So if we're introducing a new protein, if we're introducing from a species that we've already eaten, let's say we're taking a gene from spinach and we're introducing it into corn, and people have been eating spinach for as long as people have been eating spinach,
right?
Then we're not so worried that gene could be a new allergen. But let's say we're taking it from a species that we haven't eaten. We want to make sure that new protein is not an allergen. And so there's a series of tests that the international scientific community has come up with, which they would say were the best standard tests that one would do to check to make sure that a new protein that was introduced into our food supply wasn't an allergen. And they do a series of digestive tests. They might test serum of sensitive people. There are a series of tests that one could do to reduce the likelihood or eliminate the chance that this protein is an allergen. So for the current crops that are grown, I'm very comfortable telling the public, and CSPI is very comfortable telling our members and our subscribers, that the current crops don't have any food safety risks, that they have been checked and none of those proteins are allergens, for example. But I can't tell you 5 years from now that some genetically engineered crop is not going to have a protein that's an allergen. That's something that needs to be checked on a case-by-case basis. So that's why I can only talk about the present. I would expect the vast majority of genetically engineered crops that do make it to market to be safe. But I also hope that there's oversight and regulatory oversight by independent regulatory bodies, so that for the 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 that does have a food safety risk, that we're able to identify it and not commercialize that, but allow the safe ones to be commercialized.
Very, very good. So, the scrutiny is important. In other words,
Yes.
The way the U.S. deals with GE crops and foods, and the way it's dealt with in other countries differs somewhat, both in terms of how it's regulated in the field, but also how it's presented to consumers. I guess, is there a reason for those differences? And would you be just as confident going in, with the process of the food supply somewhere else outside the U.S.?
So I'm not sure I understand all the things you're asking in this question.
Sure.
And so on the regulatory front, so FDA's oversight of genetic engineered crops for food safety is a voluntary consultation process, and
Yeah.
most other countries in the world have a mandatory pre-market approval process. As an organization, we have advocated for a mandatory pre-market approval process. We think that the voluntary process isn't sufficient.
Okay.
And I can explain more if you'd be interested in it. That so I think that there are differences, although I think that the testing that's required in both those, or that is done, again, it's not required in the U.S. because it's voluntary,
Yeah.
but the testing that's done is similar. I'm not sure that there's different tests that are done in Europe than that would be done in the United States. So I'm fairly comfortable, again, on saying that these are safe because they have been approved in many other countries and because they followed the international standards on the best tests that could be used today to figure out if there is a food safety risk.